All right, welcome to the build. So it's moving quickly.
And their product velocity is intense. We're both pretty involved in the LangChain community.
This is going to be an industry, like the whole thing is going to explode.
The hype cycle is like, just because you hear everybody start talking about these things doesn't necessarily mean it's the right.
Need to go back, find out more because it's really interesting.
We're both obsessed with AI and their entire stack is just pivoted to agents.
The next question that usually comes after that is like, well, I'm fine-tuning an open model.
That's the biggest thing with the latest spec.
An exploding distribution vector.
I'm really excited. I think everybody is. I'm not the only one.
The build.
All right, welcome to the build episode, I don't know, 15.
15, I believe.
Nice.
Season 2.
Season two. Good to talk to you, mate. What's been happening?
Trying to keep pace, man. Still a lot going on, and things you're way ahead of me on, I think, as far as the new models and what's enough.
So everyone's aware, in the prep for the show, Cameron was like, I've got this really sick thing I want to demo for everyone. It's called Deep Researcher UI from LangChain. I'm like, mate, I demoed that a month ago on the show that you were on. And he's like, no, we didn't. I was like, mate, I've got the evidence. I've literally got your head on a video, nodding along, listening to me, but obviously not listening. And next you'll be telling me that, like, you'll be like, oh, mate, I can demo some, like, this sick open source model from, like, ChatGPT came out. Just let me show it to you. It's going to be a wrap. All right, in today's discussion, what are we talking about? So we've got Alibaba. We have to talk about Alibaba, Qwen, and Qwen. Those guys have been pretty busy. And then a few other tools from Cloudflare. And then I want to take you through how to build an AI podcast. I've got this AI podcast I want to start. And I want to talk you through, like, how close you can get to, like, an actual real representation of someone. In this case, me. I've cloned my voice and used, like, some professional tools in 11 Labs. So I want to give you a demo of that and see, so you can see what's hype and what's real. And then you're going to do a bit of a, is it an AI coding platform demo from Cloudflare?
Yeah, Cloudflare
right?
released a vibe coding platform, essentially, like self-hosted V0, if you want to think of it that way. So we'll talk about that. I think it's really cool.
Yeah, cool, man. So, all right. You got anything before we kick it off?
Yeah, the Deep Agents UI. I think we should definitely cover that.
Well,
now let's why don't you kick it off?
To be fair, I came in all hot and heavy this week saying, mate, I've got updates for my options trading bot and I've got updates for my AI creative kind of music toolkit, and none of those things have eventuated. What I will take you through is the web design, web development hell that I've been in, and how disappointed I am in some of these vibe coding tools when you've got strong opinions about how you want things to look and feel. So I'll take you through that and some tools and some tips.
You specifically mentioned Figma MCP.
Yeah, the Figma MCP is actually quite delightful, particularly into the Claude, but it's still not perfect. And kind of, it's one of those things where I just wish someone would build the product that I really love or that I really want. It's not quite there yet. But yeah, I'll take you through that a bit later in a demo. And then maybe it will be this Cloudflare, like, AI vibe coding tool that you're going to talk me through. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about.
Part of it is they have templates. You can basically create and upload your own templates, so you have a good starting point. So it might be. Okay. It might be part of it. It might actually
be. Yeah, so the first thing I want to talk about is China. And let's take Alibaba. And let's take a segue through this H1B visa kerfuffle. So did you see this in the news that the Trump administration is putting a $100K price tag on new H1B visas, which I was kind of concerned about because I'm on a similar visa, but not exactly that one. And it's created a bit of a kind of discussion around, like, talent, like will it maintain the talent kind of draw to the United States? Will it actually achieve what it's trying to achieve, which is put pressure on the companies that use these visas as kind of like IT kind of admin, kind of middle ranked kind of roles where they basically try and recruit people from overseas rather than American workers, and the intimation is they've been kind of abused over time versus like some of the large tech companies, which probably, if they really want someone, can afford to pay that. So did you see all this kind of discussion?
Yeah, I did. It was a one-time $100,000 per employee, correct?
It was a bit unclear. So I think everyone got a bit freaked out because they initially thought it was like 100K per year. But then they clarified it and said, probably because some of the lobbyists or the tech people around the administration probably got involved and said, look, that's really going to be a challenge. So it's per new visa in this H-1B category, which is, there is a lottery for these. So there's about 85,000 a year issued, and there are estimates of being between 700 and 800,000 active visas in the country, and they last for about, I believe, about 6 years. And the actual benefit of these is there is a migration pathway if you're on it. So if you are on that kind of visa, there is a pathway to become basically naturalized over time, which is also why they're quite valuable, and I think probably why they're quite politically sensitive. But basically, they said like it's just a 100K fee instead, which is interesting. I think the criticism that I heard was sort of like this will just accrue to the large tech companies in terms of their ability to use these, because they're the ones who can actually pay the fee. Whereas if you really wanted to drive innovation, you'd figure out a way to enable startups to actually participate as well, rather than like Cognizant and these kind of IT servicing, outsourcing kind of companies that use a lot of these to basically, I think, probably abuse the system. The other kind of question mark is just, will a bunch of those jobs that are in the United States now just be pushed offshore? In which case that will put downward pressure on wages as opposed to upward pressure on wages.
Yeah. That's what I've read several criticisms that say, well, people aren't going to change jobs. They're just going to have to physically relocate, which causes kind of reverse effects.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the goal is, right? So if you wanted the best talent in the United States, there would be other ways to kind of do this. And probably you would have like, all right, this is what I would do anyway. It starts at 100K, like say that, or whatever the figure is, because they're not cheap anyway. Like I think there was like 5K to get them anyway. And then you go into a lottery. So there's no guarantee you're going to get that visa. I would basically say, all right, it's just 100K, and then have a graduating point system based on performance benchmarks of the individual who's applying to reduce the fee amount. So if someone is like an excellent engineer, then proving that reduces the payment amount for the visa so that a startup potentially could get access to that talent. That's one way. If the goal is to try and get the best people. If the goal is to sort of stop the flow of these visas, then that's a different tactic. The reason why I wanted to mention this in the context of China is apparently China is now, or has launched a version of this called the K visa, which is basically to try and take advantage of this. So it goes live on the 1st of October, 2025. And the K visa basically is for foreign nationals with at least a bachelor's degree in STEM fields from recognized global and domestic universities, or young professionals already doing research or education in those fields. And then you don't need employer sponsorship at the time of application, which is pretty nuts. So for example, I'm on an E3 visa in the United States, which is for Australian nationals only, but it's very similar to the H-1B, except there's no migration pathway. I can't get a green card as a result of being on it, regardless of how long I'm in the country. But to get it, I had to have a job offer before I applied. So someone had to be willing to give me a job. Whereas for this Chinese K visa, it's like, you can apply and then potentially you could go into a pool and start shopping around to say, look, I'm willing to come and I've got a visa, which is interesting. And then apparently this K visa in China is like offers greater flexibility in inverted commas when you're talking about working in China. It allows for the formal employment, but also for, research roles, potentially entrepreneurship, and then collaboration. So if you get researchers, you might want to go to the country and do collaboration with other researchers in China. That's pretty significant if they're going to try and capitalize on, say, not only their talent not leaving China, but also talent, say, from India who might have otherwise come to the United States, then just going to China and working in some of their research labs, which is pretty interesting as the talent war heats up.
Yeah, I hadn't seen the K visa. Tom, did you say on your type of visa, is it still limited? Like there's a limited number? Even if you had a workplace sponsorship, there's still a chance you can't because there's too many?
Yeah, it's limited.
How does that work in your case?
So it's called an E3 visa, and it was brought in about 20 years ago as part of a free trade agreement, I believe. And it's capped at 10,000 visas, but they never reach that cap because there are just not that many professionals from Australia who come over to work in the United States. So they never actually reach the cap. I believe it was also part of a like it was around the time of the Iraq war, the V2, and I think it was part of probably a quid pro quo kind of negotiation to say like, hey, we went into that war with you guys. Can you help us out? That's me speculating. I'm speculating there, but it was surprising around the timing. The good thing about it is it requires you to prove that you are being paid more, or at least at the prevailing wage of an American. So basically, it can't be used to undercut, say, local wages in the United States, which I think was part of the negotiation of it. And you can only get it if you're in, if you have like similar to H1B, like university qualifications, and are working in a specialty, like a designated specialist field to an extent. Like it's not exclusively like that, but it has to be proven that you're at least earning at or above the prevailing wage, plus that you're qualified. Yeah, and then it's a 2-year renewal, so it's not like a H1B. Like a H1B is actually really generous in terms of the time, whereas the one that I'm on is just like every 2 years you have to effectively get your employer to renew it.
I find that surprising that it's not more competitive in your case, because I feel like a lot of Australians spend more time around the States than most Americans do, you know?
Yeah, on holidays maybe. I don't know. A lot of people do it, but a lot of Australians also go to the UK because we have a UK equivalent visa, and you can also get one to the EU as well, and they're longer and a bit more generous. And for this one, you have to have a job. So generally my mates who've gotten it before I did, they were like engineers or people who are in like in-demand positions. But on the flip side, like it isn't great because it doesn't give you any kind of like permanency. So it's always a temporary thing, basically. It's like you are going to leave the country and then there's no real pathway to stay here long term, which is a bit of a disincentive, I think, because most of the time if you're a professional and you're getting to that part of your life, you've probably got kids or you've probably got a partner, and then it's a bit harder to give them like the certainty that you might be able to get on some of those other visas, probably on purpose, I'd say. Anyway.
Yeah, I saw the H1B. I think you have like 60 days if you lose your job to find a new one. Otherwise, you have to be out of the country. Is that pretty much?
Yeah, that's the case for mine as well. Yeah, that is the case, but there's a wrinkle in that is like if you get to the end of your visa and your company says, all right, we're not renewing your contract or whatever it is, then you literally have to leave. Like you don't get a 60-day grace period after the end. So it's sort of like, it's more around like the timing of these things. But yeah, so I'm not affected by this like 100K cost at the moment. But also if it was just for new applicants as opposed to renewals, it might be slightly different. Although, you know, the thing about these kinds of changes is like it's very challenging to build some sort of sustainable kind of, either if you're a startup or a business like us, a hiring pipeline, or as an individual kind of build certainty around it and like plan your life around it, because they're so variable, they change so often. Like, yeah, it's not great policy for attracting talent. You know, I have this conversation with my partner a lot because obviously like so for context, like I had a startup, my startup was acquired. Part of that deal was I got to move to the United States. And then part of that, because I had to work in the company that acquired my startup as part of the agreement, which is often common when you do like an acqui-hire style kind of acquisition. And as part of that, so then I got a job through this visa, and then my family also was able to come to the country under this visa. But then I have probably more of a high risk tolerance, right, for variability and sort of uncertainty. But I think what probably they don't appreciate or they don't understand when they make these kinds of on-the-run policy decisions around these things, it's not necessarily the person who's getting the visa. It might actually be the people around that person that influence their decision. So you might be trying to attract entrepreneurs or high-quality engineers or doctors or researchers or whoever, but you also have to consider that the policy you put in place might work for that person and their risk tolerance. They might be married or partnered up with someone who can't handle that level of risk. So therefore, you're not going to attract those people. And that's like the conversations I'm having with my partner a lot now. She's like, well, what, you know, she's sort of like, yeah, it's fine. We're not affected right now, but like, that's not how really we've seen it play out on policy decisions in the past. I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fair. It's sort of hard for me to socially to underwrite these things when you see them change all the time.
Yeah. And it's a lot of things are handled very, I don't know, I guess black and white lately, in my opinion. So
yeah,
that's
and
crazy.
It's
man.
also
so
like,
you're saying that if something terrible happened or like you lost your job, your company shuts down or whatever, you have to get out of the country like right away.
The way it works is you have you have a visa that's stamped and basically says you have the right to come into the country between these dates. So mine was 2 years. And then you have another piece of paper which basically says this is how long you can stay in the country for related to your visa. It's called a 994. And both of those for me expire on the 29th of November this year. And I'm going through the renewal process now, which is perfectly fine. And I've had those things approved and it's all just happening in the background. But if for some reason all that falls apart, then yeah, because the problem is, because I work in tech, right? I always want to come back to the United States. This is where everything is happening. If you overstay by even a day, then there's some pretty significant penalties in terms of the amount of time you have to wait before you can return. So it's just not worth the risk, right? Like you just got to get out of the place as soon as possible because you don't want to be flagged as non-compliant because then you're really fucked in terms of like you come back in, you might want to come back in for a conference or something and then just turn you around to the airport. Yeah. I've had a few scary interactions with the border people now that this process is coming, like the policies have changed and things are a bit more aggressive. So I can only imagine it's going to get worse if, it would only be worse if you had a few flags on your file. All right, but that's enough of that. The reason why I wanted to mention this is because this is a global talent war. Like, if you have really talented people, they have options, right? The reason why I wouldn't say I'm really talented, but I definitely have options in that I can go to another place. Like if you want to compete for, high-end researchers, things like that, China, like these labs in China are absolutely going for it. And it's not a great idea to sort of put yourself at a disadvantage. I saw some analysis around these visas saying like even like America is like what, less than 5% of the total global population. Even if you assume all of the American workers are exceptional, you're still like not capturing the full bell curve distribution of very high performers. So you should optimize to try and be as attractive as possible in a global labor market. So Alibaba yesterday or the day before, they had their big rah-rah kind of like conference and they announced all of these new models across WAN and Qwen and a $50 billion kind of re-up of investment into this area, both across their cloud computing and their model investment, right? And this is why it's relevant because these guys are absolutely going for it. Some of these models are pretty exciting. Did you see any of it or go through any of these?
I saw that there was an Omni model, like everything. But when you say models,
yeah. So if you want to see,
maybe I don't know about some of them.
If you want to see, like, I don't know who was managing their social media account, but they were working overtime, like on their X account the other day, just like bang, every 2 minutes there was just something going out on there. So I'll bring that up so you can see all the different models and then we can go into the Hugging Face thing. One of the greatest things is these are mostly all kind of open models, right? I think probably the most exciting ones for me was the WAN 2.25 or Flash 2.2 Flash, which is like a competitor for like VO3 and then this Omni model. So if we want to chat about those, I might just show you my screen.
Are you typically using the Qwen hosted, Alibaba hosted version or API or like Open Router?
When I have played with these, I've used it on ModelScope on the, which is actually very good. I found that's the Alibaba Cloud kind of model garden, kind of like AI Vertex, like Vertex for equivalent like Google Cloud, but for Alibaba, which I can bring up and show you. But if we go to Qwen. And so the lab is called the Tongyi Lab. Yeah, here we go. This all came out. So yeah, there's this very, very large model. So that's the vision language model. Then there's Qwen 3 Max, which is this massive, trillion parameter model that they've got. I don't know, like I was looking at some of the benchmarks and that. I'm not exactly sure how relevant that one is. But then, yeah, Qwen 3 Max to talk about. I wasn't actually that interested in that one. This one is basically like, a vision model, which is sort of like visual agents operating phones, those sorts of things, operating kind of computer use, and then coding as well. It's said that it performs really well on that. Then there's this model, and then there's a couple of custom versions where there's like a travel planner equivalent and a couple of agentic kind of, it's almost like demos that they built, which they kind of claimed were as part of the release. They just look like demos. Yeah, an upgrade of Qwen 3 Coder as well. Live translate model, so real-time multimodal live translation and visual. Multimodal, and then travel planner. Where is this thing? Yeah, they released like equivalent of Llama Guard, like Qwen 3 Guard, like moderation rule set or moderation
Guardrails.
guardrail model, an image editing model. Yeah. Here it is. Qwen 3 Omni, basically native end-to-end multimodal. And I looked at it on Hugging Face. It's just like any to any, like anything in to anything out. Open sourced, built-in tool calling, 30 minutes of audio understanding. Yeah, it's just very impressive. Like, this is the model scope platform that they use, and here is the Hugging Face collection on this. So interact with multimodal chatbot using text, audio, images, and video. Yeah, it's just really impressive what these guys are doing, all out in the open.
Yeah, that's amazing. So Alibaba and a lot of the Chinese firms, they have some limitations on compute, essentially, right? So it seems like they're going really deep on specialized type of tasks, and then this Omni model. I mean, I guess I don't fully understand I haven't read up on the architecture, but it's almost like a model router where it's actually like a bunch of these specialized models under the hood, maybe.
I actually think, sorry, I just got to translate this. This is model scope. Usually I've got a little bit of a translate kind of thing. Here we go. I don't know if that's exactly correct. There's constraints on the chips that they get access to in order to train, right? That's like US embargoes on specific chips. They've obviously been able to get around a fair bit of that over time, but it's not at the scale. They're not building like a Colossus scale, or like some of the NVIDIA OpenAI kind of announcement where they're like, all right, this is $100 billion kind of commitment to each other, a multi-year thing, building multi-gigawatt like data centers using Blackwells and whatever's coming next. But they have been able to really crack, like I said on previous shows, specific applications where they've got a better data kind of base, like a base of kind of training data to work with, like any of the models that had come out of ByteDance. But a lot of these models are general purpose in nature, and it seems like Alibaba is probably one of the better ones. They're also setting up like these models, these Qwen models. They're also setting up Alibaba as kind of like the AWS for Asia. They talked a lot about, like, because it was an Alibaba kind of announcement day, they talked a lot about the growth of their cloud business. And so a lot of it, I'm assuming, is like investment in inference, is that $50 billion thing. Despite the fact that they can't get access to these really high quality chips, quote unquote high quality chips, they are accelerating, right? It makes me think, like, how critical are these next gen chips? Like, maybe it will be that like they never, like what we talked about last time, they just never catch up because of that technical constraint. Or maybe they will, through these kinds of initiatives that they've obviously been able to implement, accelerate enough through technical innovation under the hood, which is what the DeepSeek moment was, to basically remove any competitive edge that the hardware might provide. It's an interesting kind of way to play it out into the future. But here it is, Omni.
Yeah, when I hear about the amount of money that it takes, like OpenAI and its American firms versus Chinese, it gives me this impression that we're just like, I don't know, in my head, like sloppily just slamming things and just consuming tons of compute, where they are being more like surgical, I guess. That's just kind of my impression. And I don't know if that's totally true, but there has to be some truth in that, because the things that they're doing with far less resources is insane.
It is. I don't know the answer. I know, like, Semi-Analysis, the blog that follows the semiconductor industry, talks about this a lot around like the competitive tension. I was actually surprised by, so Colossus, the training center that did Grok 4. I was quite surprised by how small that actually was in terms of capital and actual energy consumption. Like, everyone was talking, it made a lot of noise. Everyone was talking about it as if it was like this crazy thing. And it was a very significant technical innovation based on everything that I read about. But actually, it wasn't that much money. I think it was somewhere between like $500 million and $1 billion. And then about the equivalent energy consumption for the training run, I believe, was somewhere in the order of like what the equivalent of 4,000 homes or a town of 4,000 people would consume over a year. Which, in the context of like all of the headlines and stuff around like energy use, probably not that much. Now, in the West, it seems most of what we're spending money on is on inference, right? As all of these things just explode into every single corner of Google, Meta, and AWS and every other kind of software product around the world. I think that's where most of our money and the capital is going, right? So yeah, I don't know if it's any different for these guys, to be honest, based on what some of the announcement from that Alibaba kind of demo day was. All right.
Well, I can tell
I
you,
really-
the Qwen models are my go-to when it comes to, I'm primarily using them like local, not necessarily these larger models, but even through Open Router, or if I'm going to use a open source model, I typically will go for the Qwen series. So I'm excited to check this out, especially the Omni. And I think I even mentioned to you, I was putting together like a vision model using Qwen to give other models that like the GPT OSS models that don't have vision, like combine them together. So this is right along those same lines, really.
Right. Okay. So that's interesting. So you use, say, Qwen 3 Coda over GPT, or is it when you're using it locally?
Yeah, I think the GPT OSS models are actually really good, especially when it comes to tool calling, but they don't have vision capabilities. So of course, I did it through an MCP server. I just created an MCP server that if you upload an image, instead of saying, hey, I can't handle this, it passes it to Qwen 2.5 VL, I think was their private.
Yeah, the
list,
vision
most
language.
recent.
Yeah, the vision model. Yeah.
The vision. And then I have a lot more flexibility on like, how do I want it to describe the image? And I think it actually works pretty well. And then I also have OCR capabilities in that. So for me, when I'm coding in things, I rely on screenshots a lot. Like I take screenshots all day long, drag and drop, drag and drop. So if I'm missing that, if I don't have that capability, it's a big gap. So that's kind of what led me to do that.
Well,
and I like talk about privacy and things like that. So there's some potential privacy implications there as well.
Yeah. Just on that, so the thing I want to demo for you in the web dev section later on the demo, not only is the MCP server for Figma, which has been around for ages, is the Chrome DevTools MCP server. That thing is great and removes all of that shit. Like I'm just like fucking constantly just going back and forth and saying, okay, check your work. Oh, I have to check this thing. I was like, this is nuts. And now it's just like, all right, Chrome DevTools, like Claude's just like got it. You can just push it over there. Like it's great. I've been using it for the past day.
I've actually started using that one. That one and Playwright are part of my standard tool set now.
Yeah, Playwright wasn't as good for me. And then there was a Puppeteer one as well. I was just like, it's not as good. But I just like the fact that because I'm familiar with Chrome DevTools, we're getting off topic here. But anyway, like Chrome DevTools, like that is my kind of debugging suite. So now I can it's sort of like you can communicate with it as if like I was actually just getting something out of there and then sending it to a dev. Like, yeah, I'm keen to get your thoughts on it and show and just demo it, I think. So yeah, you should try out this Omni model. Like that's pretty mental that this is just like all of these component parts and that it's all built into some sort of combined like model. So they've got the architecture here. There's like a mixture of experts thinking model and then the mixture of experts talking model that communicates, basically communicates with each other. And then obviously output components if you're streaming, video, audio, all of those sorts of things, which we talked about last week around the codec, around like encoding and decoding for different outputs. The fact that you can bring in, these are all of the use cases just in one model, right? Like, so speech recognition in audio, speech translation, music analysis, sound analysis, audio captioning, mixed audio analysis of content, such as speech, music, and environmental sounds. Then visual, so OCR, grounding objects, in visual grounding of objects, asking questions about images, image math, video descriptions, video navigation, video scene translation, audio to visual, like audio visual question and answering, visual interactions around like, model using visual inputs and audio inputs.
Yeah, man, this is
dialogue.
Crazy.
And then,
do they have any comparisons here of say like transcription comparing to the Whisper models or even like the OpenAI ones? Like, do they have a breakdown of each capability somewhere?
Let's check out this. This is the technical report. We might be able to see if there's some in here. But this is tough because usually there's no like. We usually have to wait like for an independent group. Like that's why I like the meta definition benchmarks from artificial analysis. But usually you have to wait because every time you read this, every time you read something like this, it says outperforms on the key benchmarks, and you're like, great. Like remember Llama 4 was like outperforming on key benchmarks, and you're like, yeah, Who's using Llama 4? Let's try.
I actually used it the other day, experimented. I forgot or didn't realize it's like, I think it has 2 million context windows, 2 million.
Yeah. I shouldn't talk down about Llama 4 as much. I know it is used. So, for example, when we did the overview of Rock Compound, they do use it in there, apparently. So it is used, but I guess the meta point is like, no one will ever release a model and say it doesn't reach SOTA on something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Benchmarks.
Do you know anybody who primarily uses, like anyone who would see this come out and now that's all that they're going to use? So I think you and I were, as much as we enjoy the open source and appreciate the open source stuff, primarily are using state-of-the-art models, right? Like, I wonder how many people there are who are actually 100% of the time using these open source.
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think there are lots of places where models that don't come out of the West are really relevant and useful. For example, if you want to build like a translation of like a real-time video translation app from Arabic to Italian, then maybe the Google models are good, but maybe one of these models is better. There is also like with something like this, like when these really true like Omni model, like, anything to anything models become available, this is open source, right? This could enable, say, a class of startups and apps and products that kind of weren't necessarily able to exist before, particularly if you can't control the infrastructure. So if you are required to control the infrastructure in a certain context, I'm thinking maybe like critical infrastructure or self-driving or on device or whatever, then you wouldn't necessarily be able to use like the closed model from Google that may be able to execute all of these things. So that's another part. The other factor is I think there's a hidden category of company that does fine-tune to use cases using a lot of these. So for example, I met a guy who worked at a hedge fund that just did quant trading, and all of their models were fine-tuned on top of the Qwen models. And that was about 6 months, 12 months ago. So there's a category of those. I think they're not necessarily tech companies because they weren't releasing a product, but it's a category of, I guess, AI and AI engineering that exists. That's sort of like a hidden layer that I think is powered by a lot of these things.
That's a good
so
point.
that's
Yeah,
a solid maybe. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I just said that's a good point. I wasn't even really thinking about fine tunes and customizations.
Yeah. So here is a Omni Flash comparison on a bunch of these different benchmarks, of which a bunch I've never heard of. Well, some of them I have, but yeah. So these always come out, and generally they'll pick and choose the ones specifically. Like here, they're comparing to GPT-4o, which doesn't really make any sense because GPT-5 is out. I think probably for these models, it's harder because they're open, but you'd probably need to compare some of them to like open source models. But they do compare, say, this to, say, Gemini 2.5, Gemini 2 Flash or 2.5 Pro or 2.5 Flash, for example, across some of these things. It may be because they didn't have the benchmarks available. Yeah. So, and generally, whenever they put a chart up like this, it will always show that they're outperforming on something. The only other one I want to mention before we get off Qwen is the WAN models. 2.2. So these are Alibaba again, when they call it WAN for some reason. And this is a text to video model to compete with, say, VO3, where they generate not only the video, but also the sound. And then there's multiple generations, different turns, bunch of different functionality. Components are, I believe, open source. So you can go and roll these models yourself. And they've already started rolling out this update into things like Comfy UI. So that's why I want to go and try it out. But apparently it's excellent, cheaper, open source compared to, say, the VO3s of the world, even compared to, say, VO3 Flash, which came out as recently as well, which came out a while ago, is the only one that I use. And yeah, so here's the comparison against some of these core models, although there's a new version of Kling 2.5 out, so everyone's trying to move in this space. Sora, I'm not surprised, that's lower. And Seed Dance too. I think Seed Dance, that's a very old comparison for Seed Dance, I believe. Yeah, so this thing looked pretty exciting, and I saw it was getting a lot of traction on X. So I might put this into the toolkit for my little creative, soon to be released creative toolkit for marketers, right? The toolkit that never gets released.
Nice. So this is Alibaba still. So cool.
Yeah, this comes from the same research lab. So Tongyi is the research lab within Alibaba, and then they've got the Qwen models, and then they've got these WAN image video models, the family or the names.
Yeah, the video editing model, that was like, I think at this point, several months ago, but I've used that on Replicate several times. Been pretty impressed.
Yeah. Yeah, I used the WAN one a bit.
But I think that's kind of overtaken by NanoBanana now, right?
Whoa, that's pretty cool. These examples are rad. Yeah, so who's moving to China? Do you want to go and work for Alibaba? They're definitely going for it, so it's pretty impressive to see. I think competition in this space is great. So if anything, the proof will just be it'll push the Western tech companies to go harder, I think. Cool, man. I won't stop sharing my screen. That is that. Now, where do you want to go next? We've got...
You were talking about Figma. Like I just brought up NanoBanana, and I've mentioned to you before that in the past, I really didn't use Figma that much, and I've found that I'm using it more and more, but I could still use some pointers. And what reminded me of that is that I noticed they added NanoBanana as the primary like image editing model.
Yeah.
And it works so well. Like I can just create an image SVG of like anything, which is something I was struggling with for quite a while.
See, that's interesting. So I haven't used it, actually. I haven't used it that much. The design work I've been doing recently, which I want to talk you through, is more like it's like less generative in nature. Whereas like if you're building like software, web design stuff for software, a lot of it is just like create me some motion graphics or something that looks a bit fancy that's sort of futuristic looking or whatever. And so it's really aligned well with those kinds of tools. Whereas I'm building something at the moment, which I want to talk you through, which is like, it needs to look real and have like real imagery, and like, it's sort of more for, it's less effective for that, I've found. And the tools are kind of the basic ones that are the most effective. But yeah, so what were you doing with it? Like, or what's been your thoughts?
Well, my challenge with Figma starting out it was like, it sounds so stupid, but even just navigating around and like how to select certain elements and just basic controls. Like I just hadn't spent enough time with it.
Oh, well, yeah.
And then
I'll send you some YouTube channels for that, mate.
Yeah, like now I can navigate around and start to like compose things, but I connected the MCP server. And it seemed like to me, it was like it gave Claude the ability to read out of your Figma, but it couldn't modify in Figma. Like I could take the elements out and then apply them to something else. But I was under the impression I'd be able to fully design like a mock-up through Claude. That's not necessarily the case. So
yeah, so yes, that's my kind of expectation as well. And what I'm surprised by, so like web design, AI web design stuff is it has been like one of the vanguard's kind of adoption categories, right? And what I was surprised by is when I really dove into this task and I needed to design something, how disjointed it feels working particularly from Figma into some of your other tools. And I was pretty bullish on Figma's ability to kind of lean into this space, but they're kind of not as effective as I had hoped. And so I understand what you mean. Like, I just want to talk to Claude and say, hey, can you redesign these components? Or here are some links for this image and this text, and here is the context. Go and build me like a hero component and in desktop, tablet, and mobile breakpoints. That's what I want. I can't do that. But then when I try and use the prompting tool from Figma, it's also pretty shit. Like it's kind of like very basic and it's not great at design. Like I want it to be great at design, and it's not. So those are my kind of things. But then also my big kind of criticism going through this, because trying to get these things to work is, and I can show you some examples, is like Figma have, and we covered this when they launched them, there's the Figma design environment, there's the Figma Make, which is their kind of generative kind of app environment, and then there's Figma Sites, and then they also have Figma Buzz and some of these other things, which is Buzz is just like social content.
That's the other thing. Is like design, then there's a design or jams or something like that. There's all these different interfaces. Well, so they're different environments. So FigJam's kind of like a Miro kind of whiteboard competitor, right? That makes sense. Like it's good for user journey flows and whiteboarding and sort of like that sort of stuff. I use that a lot. But there is
I guess like my expectation was that they would lean into these things more aggressively, I think. And they went public, right? And their stock just absolutely caved. And they haven't really made much progress towards making these things more usable in the vibe code kind of web design space compared to, say, Lovable. Like Lovable really is accelerating ahead in the web design game. V0 is more like, I want to build interfaces and like use out of the box componentry. And Figma have the design community, right? They have them, but they're not enabling them as effectively as I thought they would. So for example, like I can show you these here, and then I might just show you, like, I thought the MCP thing was cool, but it's like, it's not knocking my socks off yet. But can you see this?
Yep.
So this is, I'm just designing something. Actually, this is my wife's website. This is like some of the component parts of NanoBanana like are pretty cool. Like you can like extract or develop images to change the lighting, things like that. Like the simple stuff, basically, like, you know, removing the background, all of those things, kind of like really annoying tasks that used to take ages. But then, for example, like here, it doesn't feel like the AI enabled kind of components of Figma are really like they can't really perform across multiple layers. So for example, this is a typical like design thing in Figma where, say, I've got like a layer blur behind here, which is actually just the same image made smaller and then blurred apart. So it kind of has the same color spec and just creates like a false kind of depth perception into the design. That's a very common thing, right? But I can't ask AI to do that. I couldn't just click on this image and just make that happen. It's not smart in that way. And then the other part is sort of like you play, I don't know, like my design workflow is sort of like I just play around with the different components and like create kind of a color system. What I actually really wanted to do from there is to basically go off and spin up a bunch of different layouts and different things and componentize, like, and do all of the annoying background work of like creating the components and the variants and all that sort of stuff into a design system. But I can't just get it to do that. Now, I could probably get Claude to do that because that's what I do in the dev side. Once I've got it, I basically just start with Claude and say, hey, go and customize Tailwind for me and implement all of these kind of styles into the global Tailwind CSS file. I want to do that with the MCP back into Figma, and you can't really do it, which is, unless someone out there tells me otherwise, but it's not simple. So there's sort of this, it's not really taking the vibe ethos and converting people into designers yet. Now that might be on purpose, right? But if they don't do that soon, then they're going to get crushed by someone who does really do it properly, right?
Yeah, that was my take as well. It's like you can use the image editor or whatever it's called, image magic, on each element, right? But even there, like where you have clicked the image of whatever that is, like the woman or that text box, you can't, that's made up of several different elements and you can't modify all of those. You have to do like one at a time. And then even further, like instead of being able to use this entire page and just chat and say like, create the homepage, you know, the sidebar, whatever, you kind of have to do those one at a time. That's kind of your gripe, right?
Well, so for example, I kind of want to, if I can copy, maybe this will work. I don't know, copy link to section, create a landing page in this style and see if that works. This wasn't really generating these things for me before, but what you can do is you can create like component links and links back to elements in here. So I found that like, yeah, so that's the outcome, which is kind of crappy, right? That's very crappy because that's not what I want. Like I'm giving it context, like this is what I expect kind of as an expectation because I can get that sort of outcome out of, say, Lovable. What I'm getting is kind of crappy little wireframes, but what I've already got is kind of design components that I should be able to just basically go, all right, here is a bunch of stuff. Here's like colors, here's some imagery, here's some layouts, here's some reference layouts. Like I've even got a reference layout here of like, so this is, for context, this is my wife. She's a researcher and she runs a charity and she's pretty well known in the research and also sort of in the kind of media space, particularly in Australia. So I've got reference imagery from, say, other websites that I'm sort of like taking, which is common for designers to say, all right, here's some inspiration kind of layouts, Mel Robbins's and, Brené Brown's website. I'm like, so I've got all of this stuff here, right? And I could just what I want to do is just go mega prompt, here's all your shit. Go and generate me these pages or variants of these pages. And it's just not quite there. What they do have is this thing called, so you can send designs once you've got design to, say, the Make web builder or website builder, which is, Make is the app, their app builder, not their website builder, which is kind of like V0. It's nothing particularly special, but it's built into here. And you can then generate a component, which is kind of helpful. So I was using this to generate like Next.js kind of React components, Next.js compatible React components, but it still wasn't amazing. This is an example of one that came out. Like, for example, you can see it's pretty broken. The image is wrong. So the image wasn't even the one that's in the design, even though it's integrated into Figma. Like, all of this is disjointed, right? And the layout's kind of crappy and the background doesn't work. It's like, if you were anyone with any kind of skill, you'd be like, well, I'll just do it myself. Like, that is a complete waste of time. Then the other component is you can send it to these, here it is, this web design. So they actually have a web designer in here, and you can send components between layouts. So this is a layout in desktop. And in here, it's a bit more comprehensive in terms of what they've built out. So you can say, all right, I'm going to add web pages as sections, and then they've got kind of components and blocks you can just pull in and then customize, right? And then you can use AI to sort of like replace content, things like that. But it's still not, it's a lot more comprehensive than, say, doing this within the design environment. But there's no, and this has been there since they launched it, and they launched it a while ago, there's no CMS, there's no database connection. So I can't practically use this at all because I need content, right? Like, if you're going to build any kind of decent website, you need a CMS, you need a database engine behind it. So for a company that's so dominant and has such a massive stranglehold on the design community, like that's been available in Lovable for ages, right? And in V0 and all sorts of platforms, like they're just getting outmaneuvered, I think.
Exactly. Man, that's kind of honestly, I feel kind of let down because I just thought I didn't understand how to use these tools, but it sounds like they're actually pretty limited.
Well, I think two things. Like, I think it's probably like incumbent not wanting to disrupt their existing user base. They're driving into the enterprise. So they're trying to get enterprise, contracts and users. They've gone public. That's generally what everyone does. They have this a very structured kind of dev handoff workflow, right? Which is here. When you click the dev side, you can then have those components and expose them to, say, your dev team, and then you can integrate into Jira and GitHub. And then there are plugins that convert through to code. And the plugin ecosystem is pretty good, but again, like, I don't know, it's not native. They're not native things that they'll maintain. But the only thing that I think is really cool is this, which is the MCP server, which is what you were talking about. So, for example, if I just close this and get these things up, I might share my actual screen so you can see this. So can you see that? Now, what do I got? It's Claude. So let's take this component, convert this component here.
That's pretty cool.
What's that?
I said transparent terminal window. Cool.
Yeah, I've gone transparent. It's all in the interests of, enlightening you. All right, Claude. Now, let's go MCP, see what's running. All right, there's only Puppeteer there. Maybe I'm in the wrong folder.
I have a massive sheet of any time I've added a MCP server to like Claude Code with that one-line command. Feels like all the time trying to manage them like between projects, and I just use that quick reference nonstop.
Yeah, so talk me through that. So you've got like, here we go. So here is like MCP, and then I've got Figma dev mode, MCP here. Cool. And then you manage the servers. Got dev tools, the Figma one. All right, that's already connected. I thought, so MCP config for Claude, right? The user config should be available in all of your projects via claude.json. I added the Figma dev mode MCP server there, and it's not available in all projects. I thought it would be everywhere, but it's obviously not. I don't know. Maybe it's a user error.
So there's a switch, or you can control the scope with, if you type, I think, -S. Here, I'll send you an example, but at the beginning, you type, it's Claude Code add -S for scope. and then you can type either user or project. If you type user, then it will be available everywhere. And if you type project, it keeps it just within that project. So I use that switch all the time because I run tons of MCP servers, and it starts to seriously degrade things after a while. If you have
I can imagine.
So
well, yeah. So all right, that's super helpful. I'll check that. These are the actions. So you've got in this Figma dev mode, you can only get it gets the code, the variables. Like I don't know what connect map is. There's a map file, I believe, that can be appended to every Figma file that maps components into your code base, and then it can get a screenshot or so I should just be able to call this now. So this was probably the more exciting part of like diving back into all of these, was to basically just skip the IDE and just have these components and then say, hey, build a next. And that was the coolest thing. And then it gives you an estimated token count of that, right? And then you can actually edit the settings over here to say, while it's doing that, I'll just so we can show off what's going on in the background. Here, it's grabbing the image.
Your screen, just the screen share is pixelated, so I can't read that. But you like right clicked on an element in Figma and got a link.
Yeah.
So
right? In Figma, what you do is you go into any component. It has to be a frame, and basically you just right click. I'm in dev mode here, but you can do it in design mode as well. And you just right click and it just copy link to section is what it is. So you can just copy the link and then you can add it into a Claude conversation. And if the MCP server is running and connected, it can go and grab all of that detail and the components. And then also what I was going to show you is here in this MCP server settings in Figma, you can actually set the settings to download all the images and the assets as well, so that it will actually copy out all the assets. And then, you can start creating these components. That was the most exciting and most interesting part of this for me anyway. So then you can see
when you
it's
use
like
that link,
generating.
Yeah, when you use that method where you paste the link, does Figma even have to be open? And the reason I ask that is because one thing I found challenging for some reason is keeping it connected. And I think I had to you have to start Figma first and then restart Claude, or vice versa. I don't remember which one, but I kept having this problem where it's like, oh, not connected. So I'm wondering, if you use the link, does that mitigate that issue? Or
I don't know. I think Figma has to be running here because I've just had this running all night since I was playing with this last night. I knew we were going to talk about it, so it hasn't been disconnected. It might be helpful if I'm only running it in this one project. I'm not sure, but I haven't had a problem with it yet.
Well, I'll just have to mess with it. I don't sidetrack you, but trying to solving my own personal problems here.
Yeah, okay, there, and it's updated and it said, it's the MCP server is enabled and active. Okay, cool. And then that was that. And then also it's the first time that I've been actually using the V0 Figma integration, which actually is better than I expected. You can also integrate Claude using that Figma MCP. But if I show you this, so if we go into, say, the projects, recent chats, this one, there we go. It's cutting the image off. It was like a couple of variants. The reason why I like this interaction pattern is basically you can then go through and create the components pretty quickly and then have them available to be basically added to an individual code base. So that was really cool because then you can say, I'm just going to work on this component, right? So this component in this case is this, which was just copied and pasted from Figma. The process was very simple. So that was, that was the first version. And then I could just copy the components and apply the shadows and those sorts of things. But the layouts were mostly right, but it was relatively fast to get it to be correct. And all I did was a similar process for over here. That's this component. And I just copied the link to section. And you just click add from Figma. And that actually worked very well. And then you can just say, all right, those components are, I can add it to my code base. I could download the whole component thing. And you can also map it and make it map to a style, like a layout style, which is, so if I go to the design area, you can push and constrain the actual outputs using their little style guide thing, which used to be embedded in a GitHub repo, but now they've actually just exposed the components of it so you can make it a bit easier. So that was actually,
that is cool.
it's a lot faster, like a lot faster than it used to be. And then I can just you can actually open the design system in a specific dedicated editor, which then gives you a rendering of a bunch of different Shadcyan kind of components, which again is not great for web design, but it's more for product design, which is quite cool. And then you can just like change a bunch of these
when
things.
You use that Figma link, does it import the code line by line, or does it use it as a reference and then rewrite,
I actually don't know. Let's have a look. So if I go over here and I say I want to recreate or convert something as a component, let's say I've got a couple of UI components in here, which could be fun. So these are just some reference like cards that are styled from a design system. So if I want to recreate this, right, let's go over and see, copy link to section, and then I say recreate, add from Figma, and then it will, just give it a few seconds, it will convert it and give you a preview and then show you the colors and the elements. Here's the visual context so you can kind of see. Click confirm and then create this card UI element. Now that's obviously extracting the content. The contents, the variables, plus there's a screenshot. So I'm not exactly sure, mate, to be honest. It may just be using the same MCP server.
Yeah. Well, I'll have to play with it too. But yeah, I was just curious because it's like line by line what's going to work.
And it's exposed some of the color variables. Yeah. And then I think en masse, it would be great if I could. The thing that I don't have that's missing here, which is one of this startup I've been playing around with, is called Magic Path UI or magicpath.ai. And they're trying to do this, which is like component driven generative design. So you can actually generate your design system in a cohesive way using a reference UI kind of system. I would really love that, so that I could just rapidly generate a bunch of React components on the fly using natural language.
Is that the 21st.dev, or are you speaking to a different product?
That's a different product. What's 21st? What's the
21st.dev, that's at least their website. Then they have Magic. They have something called Magic UI.
Okay, yeah.
But I've used that as an MCP server, and I still do occasionally when I remember to. But it builds really nice components, and it basically like launches a web page. Yeah, that's the site. And the way that works, it like launches a web page, so you can see the elements, and then you can modify them through your MCP client, which I think is really cool. Good luck with that. But
so this is kind of like components like and artifacts or UI components in Figma, right? What I really want is an artifact gen environment that's high quality, but also like consistent with my design styles. Does that make sense? And I find like there's a little too much overlap. So if I go with Claude, it starts making design choices that I then have to retrace over. But if I stay in the design tools, I can't get enough kind of generative kind of creativity from the tools that I want to push it to create more en masse. I'm looking for a sweet spot. Yeah, this is quite cool. And then you just pull these components in. It's kind of like Shadcyan on steroids.
Yeah, you have to mess with it. I'm not going to say it's the best one, but I've had good luck with it. And just the way that you interact with it, I think is really cool and more like what I expected Figma.
So you just basically connect the MCP and then say, give me a footer like this one. Is that sort of it?
Yeah.
You can remix the component.
You can design the entire interface or elements at least through natural language, where, what we're talking about with Figma is more like specific elements.
Yeah. Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's like, I think these guys are pretty much doing what you're aspiring to. It's like you want to have your own library of components, and then anything that you build, it has like those presets essentially. It's like, this is the way that I always like my borders. This is how,
which is sort of like that's the living designs, like that's a design system, sort of like constraints over the top, like kind of like Storybook does that. And what I kind of want is this with integrated into guardrails so that anyone who generates UI components it will never go off the rails. So I know Builder.io, they have like this Fusion product, which does that a little bit. And I was playing with that, but it's not really that well built yet. This is really cool. The other factor is Builder is really attractive to me because it then would enable like hooking up all the props across all of your components so that you could actually run it as a practical website rather than having everything be hard coded. Whereas there isn't really that easy next step when you go from, say, V0. What's going on with my component?
Right. Yeah, that's
When you
the
go
other
from,
thing
say-
I got confused on is all the plugins. Like Builder.io is a plugin within Figma, and why do I need this versus some of these other things? It's just like anything, just need to spend time with it. But confusing out of the gate.
Well, it's not easy and it's not simple. That might be a good place to pivot over to this Cloudflare one, because I'm keen to see what they're doing in the space. Like, I think V0, probably these guys are just like seeding the ground. They're like, we can't compete, or we don't want to compete on the web dev front with guys like Lovable and a bunch of those other, and LoveArt and all these other ones. And because they're mostly developers, they probably say, well, like developers can just hook up the last mile of content into whatever CMS they want to do. Yeah. Do you want to show me the...
Yeah. That's probably a good transition, because the Cloudflare, I would say, just based on a little bit I've done with this so far, it's more focused on like the backend infrastructure than UI components and things like that. And Tom, I mentioned part of this Vibe SDK is templates. So it might take a look at that, and that might be along the lines of what you're looking for. Yeah, I just stumbled upon this yesterday. As you can see, it was a blog post put out September 23rd, which is 2 days ago as of now. And they put out what they're calling Vibe SDK. Of course, just kind of following the path of the trend of all the excitement with Replit and V0 and all these things. Now, if you've used Replit and V0, you know that it's very easy to publish an app, and then you get like a default domain v0.app or something like that. And then you can add your customized domains, but then you're really in the Vercel ecosystem. So me, as a big advocate of Cloudflare, I think they've built some really amazing things. And if you pay attention, I think there's a lot more there than what people... I don't think they get enough attention as far as what they're doing on the AI and agents side of things.
You don't reckon they get enough attention,
essentially what they're...
even though they run 20% of the world's internet traffic or something? Isn't it something
Well, yeah,
crazy
everybody
like that?
knows Cloudflare as for their like web application firewall and network type stuff. But they're building all the components for AI systems that you need, not like apps, like to build unlimited scale applications. You can start working on that for $5 a month on their initial paid subscription.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, so essentially what this allows you to do, and I'll pull up the web interface here. Not only is it a vibe coding tool that you can create apps, what I feel like they're giving people an introduction to their Workers for Platforms offering. And Workers for Platforms is essentially for if you want to be the provider where other people like Tom, maybe you want to launch an app. So you can actually create it and run it on my platform, and I can be the provider for multiple apps and companies. So the Workers for Platforms offering is actually something I've been doing a lot of work with lately. So I saw this and naturally I got very excited because it's like exactly in line with some of the things I'm working on. If you're familiar with Cloudflare's Agents SDK, they're breaking off several things. Like they also have the real-time Agents SDK, which are technically separate, but there are mentions that say they are going to consolidate everything into the Agents SDK. So long story short, let me see if I can find a diagram. They've outlined the infrastructure components behind this. So essentially what you're doing is you're creating a router, and based on in the base level app, they've integrated Google authentication and GitHub. Based on your unique sign-in, the Cloudflare worker will route you to your sandbox that you have access to. So let me just pull up an example here. But the other thing that I think is really cool, Cloudflare just started doing on their blog post and some of their GitHub repositories, they have this button, deploy to Cloudflare, and it's like super simple, but also makes things really easy when you want to just kind of demo something or do it quickly. I've already deployed this, and there are some secrets you have to enter. So really, if you just set up a Cloudflare account, generate a API key, you should be able to get through this. In fact, most of it is pre-filled. But this template, I can tell you from experience, to set all this up, these individual components manually or separately, it's actually quite a bit of work. So within like 5-10 minutes, you can spin up the backend infrastructure where you can run a comparable app to like V0 Replit, but on your own infrastructure. And Cloudflare, everything's on the edge, unlimited scale. So if you really wanted to make this into like a real platform, you absolutely could. So let me just jump to the exciting part. Tom, you have the blog post, so we can include the link, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, or it'll be in the vault.
Yeah, and then they have this. If you want to clone the repository, you can read through all the detailed instructions. If you want to use their example app, you can go to build.cloudflare.dev, and then surprise, surprise, it pretty much looks exactly like Replit and all those others, right? The cool thing.
That's so sick.
So if I go down here to discover, you can see just like Claude or like Claude artifacts, Replit, V0, you can check out other people's apps they've created. So it's like, there's nothing necessarily new here. This is all basically replicated from other things that exist. So let me just use this. I'll copy this other guy's prompt so you can actually see what prompts others used to create their app. You can go in here and look at the code just so you can see what it looks like from a fresh run.
So it's building a Webintosh, a fully fledged macOS-like experience, but as a web app. It should have a full file management, settings, image viewer, and working browser, and a terminal emulator. This is a Cloudflare worker. So you won't be able to run real commands. Thus, you would have to emulate everything, try to add as much stuff as you can, and finish this and polish it as much as possible. Also conduct multiple review phases towards the end, just to make sure there are no errors and bugs. Okay. The OS should be really smooth and lag-free. And it should just have a UI. It should have a UI just like a Mac OS. And please use durable objects for it. What's durable objects?
Durable objects is revolutionary. It's Cloudflare runs workers, which are serverless, stateless infrastructure. So it's like it's a way to persist. It's just storage. It's
like a blob storage.
They have 3 different.
Yeah.
Well, Cloudflare R2 is blob storage. Durable objects is a little bit different, but the other thing with durable objects is it's like real-time WebSockets. So you can kind of use that as your state storage.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a combination of compute and storage backed by a database. Yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. So it's stateful.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Stateful serverless applications.
Yeah. So if you deploy an agent using Cloudflare Agents SDK, by default, the Cloudflare worker has a durable objects attached.
Mate, you're slowly winning me over to Cloudflare. This is going to become the Cloudflare podcast.
You don't have an account, set it up. $5. Actually, I think.
What do you got? Some sort of
even
referral
for
link
free,
you're going to put in here?
You can do
it's like just mention Cameron
stuff
at the door. Mention him at the door, and I'll get my $2.50.
I need to get more involved on the cloud, and for as much as I do on Cloudflare, we really don't talk about it much, but I need to get more involved in their community and stuff, because it's like, this is primarily what I work on lately. Cloudflare.
This is really sick.
Tom, yeah, and I can't say like, does it crank out a amazing functional app? I don't really know yet. Of course you can customize it, but you were talking about your process in Figma to create like, I don't know, the theme or the tailwinds and stuff. So as you can see here, it's essentially the first thing it does is it creates a blueprint. And it has the colors, and then it describes various elements, right? Creates like a standard. That's the very first thing that it does.
Which is
What I'm
common
not,
for like an agentic. That's what Claude does, and like that's how I like to prompt Claude when I'm building stuff. Right, is like, all right, let's set the layouts, the styling, the standards first. My rub on like Figma was like, I want those two things to be in sync so that I don't have to update or push anything in terms of code. Like if I change the variable or the component in Figma, I want it to be real time updated back into my development environment in a way that doesn't require me to set up like a mapping file and all this kind of garbage. I want it should be integrated and seamless so that I can generate components on the fly in design and also generate layouts and actual execution in code on the fly and have it all work seamlessly together. Yeah. That's my main criticism.
yeah, that's going to cause me to ask a dumb question because it's something I've wondered about. Is it possible to stream web components? Like you were using a link. Well, is it possible? Are there
Yeah.
frameworks or anything where you
Yeah,
can
from
like,
Figma. Yeah.
you don't use
Yeah,
any
there is.
code, you just have like links to the elements that stream
Yeah.
somehow, or
Yeah, there is. Yeah, but you have to set up. It's just a shitload of config. Like, or at least that's my perception of it. So, code Figma, code Connect. Yeah, that's their version. It's enterprise and like enterprise plans basically. So the design components link to a corresponding code component. Now, there's also like platforms like Storybook also do this, which is like living style guides where you publish to Storybook, and then that's your particularly like emerged when React started, and React like component driven design started becoming more and more popular, so that you could have like a living connector. But there's like they haven't really been reimagined for the world when agents are both doing design and dev or a combo, and you want to interact with them in some sort of consistent way. Like that is completely broken, at least in my experience of wanting to orchestrate across both of those tools and platforms to do it easily and well. Like it doesn't seem like it works very well when you're replacing the people who are the designers and the devs with agents and you're just overseeing them. Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's really interesting. And just like a simple example is the favicons or icons. I realized, well, instead of changing these all the time, I'll just use the Google favicon service link so that anytime if I update on Google service, it updates everywhere. And then that just made me think about all these other components where that would be really nice if you could do that.
Yeah. And that's sort of like, component like architectures. There was a whole like that was a real shebang, like, and real like trend from like 2018 or something, when people were talking about that, like these living style guides where you could ship, it was also around the same time when everyone was going crazy for microservices and stuff. And yeah, that was like a real thing, but I don't think it created much enterprise value, but it definitely kept a bunch of designers and devs busy for a long time.
Yeah. All right. Well, oh man, now it still has a whole nother phase. It does run for quite a while. And one, I guess, point of feedback I would have on this is, yes, you can see all the steps and its progress as it works through this, but I don't feel like I have very good visibility into viewing the actual changes. Like if I click on, okay, it's apparently working on demo page, I can click on it, but I don't necessarily see the diff. So maybe that's just something that I'm not aware of. They do have this console button down here where you can see they've got the colors all messed up, but maybe it's just this console button is the answer. I don't know. But anyways, one other thing that I think is really cool, Tom, you were talking about like all the different Qwen models and as we know, like different models excel at different types of things. So one thing they've done really well here is set up a basically like templates for different types of tasks. So you can customize this, and by default, they've set it to Gemini. But if I want to do I like using ChatGPT, say, for planning. Well, I can change that. Maybe not in I guess you can't change it in the hosted version, but I started spinning this up.
Yeah. So you must be able to do the config, which is similar to how LangChain have some configurations like that on some of their like agents out of the box, right? You can say, all right, model config for agent steps XYZ, like this planner, like the planner can use this model, the executor can use this model. Yeah.
Yep.
Particularly if you want to manage costs, things like that. So
yeah, and I see that.
Oh, this looks way nicer. Did you do the design on this?
Oh, well, thanks. No, this is I started stripping their version down, and lately I like just.
Oh, so this is on our
basic,
demo site,
plain
vibe.demos.
white lately. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I've always been more like dark mode type of person, but lately I'm like just clean white stuff. I like it. Anyways, no, I was trying to show on this version how you can change the models, but whatever, you get the idea. You can customize it.
Did you check under the hood? So when you forked that, the actual repo, like I'm looking for what's actually in the repo of this and how it actually works. Did you dig into that at all?
Yeah, it creates a clone of this Vibe SDK repo, and you can check that out. And Tom, that's where we can. I mentioned the templates, and that's what I need to spend more time on. But from what I saw, it's essentially pulling from templates that they've created, and I think that's where you could probably get pretty customized here. It's a separate repository, Vibe SDK templates.
Got it. This is cool. So the next, the components.
See, here
right.
They have
perfect.
A bank of different next components, for instance. So the way that works is it uploads these templates to blob storage, and then your Vibe platform, it has what's called a binding, which is like same thing as like a API connection, except it's not a publicly exposed API. It links their infrastructure components behind the scenes, essentially.
Yeah. This is perfect. So I actually have a use case for this right now that I'm thinking about at work, which is like we have a template configuration file for mobile inspections, and it's driven off a certain syntax, but I want to build a visualizer for it so I can just give it to people and say, hey, just generate your own kind of inspection template. Off the back of it, we'll get the generator file that comes out the back that has the correct syntax into the specific templating language that's the guys use. But on the front end, we could visualize it, and the people could it could be like interactive. This is perfect for that because it's like natural language to first paint, then like iterate through it, like would be perfect. And
that's what I was thinking. You could essentially create not even just elements or UI elements. You could create basically like a full app and then allow people to like make their own custom version or something, I think this creates endless possibilities. Yeah, I don't know how long this will take. It seems like the more further along in time we get, these things they just run forever, which is cool. But on this one, I can't tell where it's at exactly.
That's okay.
So I don't know how long this will take.
It looks cool. And then you can just go and play with it on our actual version, right? Which is the build. Or on the demo one on Cloudflare build.cloudflare.dev.
I'm showing it on the Cloudflare hosted, but I just cloned that repository, and then you just follow the steps in the README. I was trying to think, if there's anything like real gotchas, but I think it's pretty straightforward. All right, so we'll see if this works, but I hit publish or deploy, and so it created a nice error page. Error. Well, I think it's still going. I deployed it while it's still in progress. But if you run this on your own infrastructure, what's cool, just like all these other apps, is you can create custom domains and give, if you make this a customer facing app, you can allow people to create custom domains and things like that.
Yeah, so multi-tenant SaaS, that'd be great.
Yeah, going from, in my career, going from on-prem infrastructure and physical servers that the amount of setup time and complexities to build this type of infrastructure on a back end is absolutely insane. And the fact that I can I want an app that does this, and now I'm going to publish it and deploy it, and other people can use it is totally underappreciated, I think.
Man. On-premise infrastructure. How old are you? Did they have roads when you were growing up and
Well,
did you go to school on a horse?
It's illegal to ask my age, I think, Tom. So for one,
age.
Don't do that.
Just 29.
No, I'm just kidding. Old enough that I used to carry around a stack of you know, like those big books of CDs people would have in their cars, like in the 90s, early 2000s. I used to carry a book like that.
Mate, we're the same
of-
age. We're the same age. I know what these things are.
Yeah. I used to carry around as my part of my standard tool set at work a book like that of DVDs that had like Windows, ISOs, VMware, ESX, vCenter, stuff like that on discs that you would load into a DVD player. Like, it's absolutely crazy when you really think about going. And then we got USB drives, and then the internet got much faster.
Yeah.
It's absolutely wild.
So
anyways,
going back to Cloudflare, on here, do they have a tracing observability tool similar to, say, Langsmith? Do they have something like that for these apps? Or how do they do tracing in?
Yeah, yes. Cloudflare AI Gateway. And I think this app even by default uses Gateway. Here, let me stop sharing my screen for a second and I'll show that. I think I talked about AI Gateway the other day. Do you remember?
Oh, this is where I wasn't listening to you.
Yeah, that's fair.
Touche.
That's fair.
Yeah, touche.
So Cloudflare AI Gateway is actually pretty cool. It allows you to aggregate your LLM providers. So
do you want to share
Cloudflare themselves, what was that?
Do you want to share? Can you share it or no?
Yeah, sorry. It didn't select. So AI Gateway, they have Workers AI, which is a little bit different. It doesn't have the observability. It's more just like pure point to an LLM and use it. But they host all these, like they have GPT OSS, the llamas. So you can run these models hosted at Cloudflare, which is pretty cool. More on the business side of things, you would want to use AI Gateway. So this allows you to aggregate providers. Well, that's the reason I'm getting all these errors, because I hadn't adjusted for this 120 model.
Yeah, that's okay.
But anyways,
when you click into there, can you actually see the actual errors and stuff? Like, is it a tracing
Yes.
equivalent?
It's not it's not as user friendly from the interface perspective as a Langsmith, but that's also the case pretty much across the board with Cloudflare, because they're providing like a lot of the manage Cloudflare infrastructure. It's more through like writing scripts and commands than their user interface. There's actually not a lot you can do in the web portal. So that's the difference, is it's what you actually would end up doing to get something more along the lines of Langsmith is you dump these AI Gateway logs to like a R2, and then you create your own reporting. So long way of saying it's not exactly the same as Langsmith, but you can create your own customized version of it, essentially.
Yeah.
And this is really cool because I can run OpenAI, Google, Anthropic. I mean, somewhere here they have a list of all the providers, and I have one endpoint that I can point to instead of having to set up like a different endpoint for every provider and different API keys. I guess that was the other thing, is if you use AI Gateway, you can add your provider keys. Oh, this is a good screen. So I can add my provider API keys and then just point to my gateway. And then within the gateway, you can secure it with your own authentication. So I can create a API key token for my gateway. And if I wanted to, then I can provide end users access without configuring all these different things per provider. On top of that, I guess I don't have it set up on this one. They have dynamic routing. So say you had a service where it's set up like subscriptions. So if you wanted for free, you can run Llama, and then at the premium level, you can run OpenAI or something like that. Then you can set that up with these dynamic routes. It looks like they changed this. Huh. There was like a GUI interface. Here we go. Now this isn't necessarily a drag and drop, but you see how I can create these flows where it says if the user, if the user's on a support plan, then go this way, and they use Llama. Otherwise,
that's great. That's cool.
Yeah.
So like a logic routing routing.
Right. So this is what I mean. Like they have put out so many different components in their AI ecosystem. And I guess it's pretty technical. Maybe that's why. Because it's the way I see it, Cloudflare is made for, it's going to attract people who are creating more like platforms and services for people, not necessarily like end users to create a single app or something like that.
Yeah, well, everybody knows them. Like they're pretty well known in the developer community, primarily around like basically DNS, right? DNS and kind of making sure that like you're not getting taken down by DDoS attacks. And I think expanding into these areas is pretty amazing.
It is. And I guess while we're out talking about the gateway, a couple other things that you hear a lot of people talk about, but sometimes don't have good solutions for. They have guardrails, so you can turn that on. I usually turn this off because, well, in my test stuff, because one, it costs, you're like doubling your cost because it has to pass through another model, and it makes it slower because it's passing actually on the message and the response. Usually it's passing through another LLM. But anyways, guardrails typically going to be required in like a compliant environment or a corporate environment. And then they've also recently added this DLP, data loss prevention. Essentially the way it's like a proxy. It sends all of your communications through this proxy, and then it looks for like if I put in a bank account number, then I can flag that or I can block it.
That's sick.
So that's DLP along the same lines as guardrails, but also a little bit more targeted, and it's brand new feature. So I think that's evaluations. We talk a lot about that with Langsmith, and that's obviously a big part of their focus. I have not, other than just kind of clicking around and experimenting a little bit, but I haven't gone into depth with Cloudflare.
They all work relatively the same way, right? It's like you can tag them and it just records the data set. You can create an eval set off a data store. OpenAI's one is pretty simple like that versus like the LangChain stack is more complicated, more advanced, similar to sort of like the weights and biases and all those guys.
Yeah.
Everybody sort of has a little bit. I think and in these contexts, it's generally an eval in the context of like real-time eval. You're like trying to catch shit from real-time stuff rather than like evaluations where you're like trying to build, like as a developer, trying to build stuff and then evaluate the performance. So it's more like logging and kind of issue identification and debugging in real-time kind of eval sets, right?
Yeah. Well, when you talk about real-time, I think that's especially where Cloudflare could have an advantage. Maybe Langsmith has things like this too, but they have queues and workflows and notifications. If I'm logging information through my gateway, sending it to my logs, I can trigger notifications if something happens. So like if that DLP rule hits, then it can automatically trigger workflows. And of course, then you can use additional Cloudflare infrastructure within those workflows. So it's like unlimited of what you can do here.
Another really cool thing that they just launched, which you told me about, I'm playing with it here to set it up, which links to what I want to talk about next around 11 Labs, is this real-time kit, these like real-time agent kits. And you can launch like an actual agent via like WebRTC. Now that's really cool. I love seeing all of these things. Like you can build an agent and then just like deploy it to join Zoom calls or call people and all sorts of random shit.
Yeah. So on I assume you have a free account or you just signed up. Can you actually create this and use this playground?
Yeah, I can. I'm just building an assistant. So this creates a meeting. You can confirm. Yeah, it's just like, it's a build agent that might record our podcast meetings. Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. I guess they're basically saying, look, they've got all of this infrastructure. They need to figure out a way to monetize everything, right? That's sort of, they kind of need to kind of expand into the available kind of toolkit that a developer might need. And it looks like they're doing it really well. Oh,
yeah, exactly. I don't really know how they make money, to be honest. Like,
well, I was actually just checking out their
person. Like I do, they make money off of their enterprise customers, but the stuff that you can do for on the $5 subscription. And then, like I said, the Workers for Platforms is, I think it's $35 a month. But like that provides you, it would have been like thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in very recent times. It gives you those capabilities for like $35.
Yeah. Well, I was actually just wondering about that myself. So they just crossed about $1.5 billion in revenue in 2024, and they're growing pretty well on a quarterly basis. So they should like beat that. They should get to about $2 billion in revenue next year, but they're still losing money. So they're basically, but they're public. So they're basically funding a lot of it through long-term debt. So they're obviously betting pretty hard, and their percentage losses have been going down consistently over the last 5 years. So they're doing it well, right? They're expanding outside of their category. So from, if you look at it over time, the strategy is obviously working for them. So over the past 5 years, they've grown revenue from like 500 million to like this year will be 2 billion. But they're not crushing it in terms of like free cash flow. So they're obviously spending most of that money on research and development expenses. It's the biggest line on their balance sheet. So I don't know. I might buy some shares after this actually.
I actually did.
It has
recently.
gone up. It has gone up about 100%. I think since the bottom in April.
Yeah,
it's
they
gone
always
up
say
by
invest in the
$100.
things that you actually use. And I had that realization. I'm like, man, I'm so deep in this Cloudflare stuff, and I don't own any of their stock. So I
Yeah.
did. Yeah, they have
So
some cool, man, this real-time stuff just out of the box. And then, of course, you can customize it. It's so cool. Like, even some of these little plugins they have, like, you can create a watch party. So I just pasted this link in here. So we could use this for, like, podcasts if we wanted to watch videos. And then it sends all that audio and video. You can create automations, dump it to R2, and then notifications. Once it hits R2, it transcribes the audio, et cetera, et cetera. But it's an amazing set of managed infrastructure that you don't really have to worry about. I guess that's the thing, is they're providing managed infrastructure at the end of the day.
Yeah, this is very cool. So this is similar to, all right, yeah, so you can build an agent and push it into these meetings, yeah, so that I can join these things. Cool. Very nice.
Yeah, I think they have, you're looking at this template.
Yeah, agents.
So
It's very
you
simple.
can
It's
have
not
build an agent.
It's not particularly complex when you actually play with it.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty out of the box example they give you where you can spin it up and then have it join your meetings and take notes for you.
Oh, that's cool. So this is it works and is integrated with 11 Labs. So I could create this. If you just click that. Yeah, there you go. You can change the provider.
Yeah, except there's a bug here because I use Assembly AI for things. They've blocked it. You can't even select it.
I know if
So,
you
I
click
guess
out of there, I think if you click out, you should be able to edit it, right? That's what my problem was before, was editing these things, and then I had to unclick the. Yeah, I think it's like you have to.
I don't know.
Yeah. There was a little bug in the thing. You can edit them once you click out of. There we go.
But yeah, if you're into like communications type stuff, definitely check out their real-time platform. They also have a bunch of templates on GitHub as well for like chat rooms. Like you can basically create your own version of Discord with zero customization. Like it's absolutely amazing.
Do they do phone numbers as well?
I'm sorry?
Do they do phone numbers? Like, do they try and compete with Twilio and that sort of thing? So when you're building these agents, it can actually like
I don't think so.
Inbound and outbound.
Yeah, I was wondering that
as
well. You'd think so because the icon is a phone, right? But
that's quite the assumption. Yeah, man. The only thing I'll probably show you, and then we can probably wrap it, is this. So you see that, okay? So I've been playing around with 11 Labs a little bit, and that was the first time I'd actually converted my voice or a voice into a high quality voice clone. So the other voice clones I've been doing have just been simple, like a couple of minutes of audio. Whereas this one was like high quality kind of like microphone recordings to clone a voice, because I wanted to see how good they actually are now. And then if I could just create a simple pipeline to create like a podcast that I kind of want to create that would be like a supporting podcast to this one. So this is here in my voices. I don't know if you've played around with this before, but they've got like, it's my ideal kind of like text-to-speech platform, mainly because they just provide quite a lot of different voices and a lot of kind of cool, it's like ASMR, British Whisper. Like they've just got a bunch of really good voices, I think. And then my voice that I clone. So when you create a kind of a high quality professional voice clone, you need about 5 minutes worth of audio. My voice is just in here.
Yeah, the first thing I realized is how much it actually matters, like your tone and everything. If you use 5 minutes of your voice from this podcast versus 5 minutes from a different one, it probably will come out quite different. So
yeah, so that's my voice. And then these were the recordings that I put in, and you can just sort of get up past this 30-minute. This is the voice designer kind of interface that they have. I was surprised at how easy it was. And then you can sort of optimize a couple of different components in terms of like the intonation and a bunch of different parts like that. Let's just get out of there and show you it in practice. What I actually was going to show is that they had this like redesigned kind of like studio area for these like this in their creative platform. And I came up with this, I want to launch a little like audio only podcast that's like 5 to 10 minutes long called Good Vibes. And it's basically just like an audio only kind of experience that gives people core developer and software engineering information and concepts so that they can improve their vibe coding skills. So it's super simple. And I was like, all right, well, how easy would it be and how close could you get to like a professional experience just using these tools and one of your cloned voices? And actually, it was pretty impressive. It needs a bit of nuance in terms of, say, they've got this like pronunciation editor where I'd have to put in like a dictionary to say, all right, crud in capitals means crud, as in like lowercase. Otherwise, it says like CRUD, and it makes no sense. Or like some of the phrasing where, yeah, it might say SQL or SQL. Like it doesn't do those conversions well. But once you build like a pretty solid dictionary like that, then the quality actually would be high enough, I think, to probably publish. So for example, all I did here was I said, like, this is a podcast that I want to generate. I used Claude to actually come up with it. And I gave it basically a prompt that was just like, I'm creating a vibe coding podcast, 5 minutes worth of tips for web devs, create a script. And then I pasted like an excerpt from our podcast in terms of how we actually talk from the transcript, and said, just match the syntax and the phrasing of this text when you're writing the script. It took a couple of iterations, but this is sort of like the first one that it kicked out. And then all I did was, because it's called Good Vibes, I just used their music gen tool, which is over here. And I was like, all right, I need something that sounds a little bit like the Beach Boys, because like the Beach Boys, like Good Vibrations, right? And it has a theremin in it, and it's sort of like poppy. That wasn't working as well, but like this one sort of came out. I think it was the first one that I chose, which is like, it's like poppy and, you know, I don't know. It definitely rejected it when I said, make me something like the Beach Boys. But when I put in something that was like, make me a 60s style pop song that has like, you know, is surfy kind of beach vibes with a theremin, then it did come out. And then basically I just got it to use my voice to execute on this. So if I put the audio, let's see.
that is funny. I've noticed that with like Suno as well. You can't say sound like this artist, but you can really describe that same artist, and then it works just fine.
Yeah. And like I was showing you last week, the I think it's the audio lab. There's an audio lab that's linked to those guys where you can just add in a reference piece of content, like a reference piece of audio. So you're not prompting it, but you put in the reference audio and you say like 8 bars of this, please. And yeah, so this is the result. So like, it's pretty cool. It works for the most part. Once I get a dictionary in there, I can probably just set up a pipeline. There's an MCP server for this, but also you can just use the API and a template and just like punch out a bunch of these things, so that, you know, as a content creation pipeline. And the voice actually sounds pretty good. Like, I was pretty impressed with the quality of the voice output. So yeah, that's something I just wanted to show you quickly. It's like a 5 minute sort of turnaround. Pretty fun.
Nice. Are you able to export that or the audio? Because it didn't come through. So hopefully it does on edit.
Yeah,
But
I'll
I'm
chuck
curious.
it in. I'll chuck it in the edit. I'll share it with you.
These are the good vibes.
Hey there. So today we're talking about database CRUD operations, and I know what you're thinking. CRUD sounds boring as hell, but here's the thing. This is literally the foundation of every web app you'll ever build. And somehow everyone manages to screw it up. CRUD stands for create, read, update, delete. That's it. 4 operations: create new records.
And then don't they have the voice training built into Riverside? Because one day I was messing with that and I created one of yours. I didn't have to do anything. I just clicked a button and it generated this whole thing in your voice. But I can't remember if they were using 11 Labs.
Just don't break into my bank account then.
Well, I didn't break in. I just opened new ones. So no worries.
Yeah, that's not a surprise in America. It's like
the banks themselves. That's kind of standard
the land of
practice.
identity theft and fraud. Yeah, that's the last thing I wanted to show you, mate.
Yeah, it'd be cool. I was thinking it'd be cool. You could have, maybe we should create a challenge like that real-time audio pipeline. I think that would be the last piece. You could close the loop and have an agent that you're able to like converse with in the meeting.
Well, actually, so just on that, that's the other thing I can show you, which I have used in 11 Labs, and it is kind of cool. Let's see, screen, this one. So using those same things, they also have a similar like agent designer, which I can show you. Attach this so you can, which is, so they've got this creative platform, right? And then they've got this agents platform, but your voices are available in each place. So I created like a little agent conversation here. I created an agent, which is just a support agent with my voice. And then it's just got a really simple like prompt editing like area, the first message, and then the system prompt. And then you can actually like design a workflow. So similar to the Cloudflare thing, like sub agents that have like sub prompt, like prompts and knowledge base. So like very basic sort of thing. Over here, rearrange the nodes. That's fine. Let's save that. These are the models they have with the costs for the text tool calling. Okay. And then you can customize the voice. So this is my voice here, the one that we just heard, and then the speed. So what I can do is I can, and then you can add eval criteria and collection of the data. So similar to the Cloudflare equivalent, like the goal, and this is just an LLM to say like, all right, the goal of this is to triage a support request. And then you can write a prompt that will evaluate everything against that and just give you a success, failure, or unknown. It's kind of like simplifying things if you want to just deploy like a voice agent into your business. And then a data collection area so that you can collect components of the data as it comes through. And then there's, creating test cases before you take it live. Like this looks pretty sweet in terms of like just a simple click and go kind of voice builder. I really want to launch one of these now. And then there's, you can set up MCP servers as well off the back of this and integrate it.
So they had zero PII. So it has some type of like guardrails built in, you said?
I assume so. Although I can't, you can end the call. Yeah, cool. So you can give it like the settings and then these are custom MCP servers. So, and then I can send it to you. So you can just click on this link and have a crack at it and then just chat to me. And then I'll be able to see it. So for example, send this to you and you can open it and have a chat. But while you do that, you can also embed this. So I can like create this and embed this on our build website and then you can just chat to me, right? And we can call you. Yeah. And then in here, you can then see previous evaluations. So here is the message count on a conversation. And I'll give you a summary. The user and the AI agent engage in somewhat unfocused conversation. This was when I asked my wife to have a conversation with me as the agent. The user initially prompts the agent to do it. Hawk, say whatever you want. That's me describing that she should just say whatever she wants. And then the user expressed curiosity about 11 Labs because the default prompt was basically teaching the person about 11 Labs. And then you can see the actual transcript of each conversation. So it's pretty sick, really. And then you can
that is
play back the
super
good
cool
conversation.
So if I click, that makes it super easy. You just shared this.
And then you can import a number from Twilio or from this SIP trunk. I don't know what that is, but from Twilio. Twilio, you can just register a number pretty quickly. So then you could actually do inbound and also outbound. So they actually have an outbound caller here where you can upload batch calls into the agent, like create batches of phone numbers, push them into an agent with instruction. So it might be like, I don't know, appointment follow-ups or appointment confirmation, something like that, something simple that like a hairdresser could load up. You could, like in a small business app, you could say, confirm every appointment for the next week via a voice agent. And then it will just go into your CRM, grab that data, and then push it into here and could confirm every appointment or reschedule based on the tools that it has available, which is pretty cool.
I'm going to have to play with this.
You say that about everything. But yeah, it's pretty rad.
Well, I know there's not enough time. In the moment, I'm always like, yeah, I'm going to. So it looks like you can chat. I guess, I didn't see you share what it looks like on the end user side.
I think I'll check it out up here.
I have it pulled up. I
think it's just this page. It's just what it looks like here. And then you just click on it.
Yeah.
And you can chat. And that's the embed. And then you can embed that as a widget on your website as well. But yeah, I'll upload the example so you can listen to it.
Huh.
Cool, man.
So you have it open, I have it open. So you can only use it one person at a time, it looks like, maybe.
I think that might just be the share version. I don't know. I can't hear it. I can't hear the audio coming out from your side, but yeah. You're talking to two versions of me now.
4 versions of us talking. Yeah.
But yeah, man. Good show.
I think let's set that up and have an AI guest on our podcast. That would be cool.
I wonder if it'll ever get that good. I wonder if it will ever be as good as we want it to be, or how much it really it takes to make it excellent, and feel real. It definitely doesn't feel real now, but it feels good enough for some of those applications, like confirming appointments and those sorts of things.
Yeah. Well, of course, it depends on there's good enough. And then you were saying earlier about images or audio or something, like close enough isn't good. I want it this, exactly this way,
Yeah. I think the uncanny valley for these sorts of stuff is pretty wide. The best one, I think, is still OpenAI's voices. I always do voice to OpenAI on my app, just if I'm going for a walk, and that's probably the best, I think. And you can implement that in your apps using LiveKit. They're like over the top LiveKit version. Mm-hmm. So if you can replicate it, right? They're the ones I think are the best. All right, mate. Thanks. All the links will be in the vault. Thanks for the demo. I'm going to go buy some shares in Cloudflare.
Thank you. I'll have to read. I got more reading, but I think there's other things we haven't covered yet.
Cool, man. I'll see you next week. I'll have an update on the options trading AI bot or the music bot.
The music.
You want the music? All right, let's do the music next week.
That's my vote. I was actually wondering about, I started looking into platforms you can collaborate. We could connect our DAWs. That was a dream of mine when I was 14, by the way, and now it's actually possible, and I just don't spend enough time on that. But the durable objects and real-time stuff, that's another area I was wondering. I think you could do some really cool stuff with music. Yeah,
there were a few startups trying to do that, trying to be like the online concert kind of performance platform, like high quality streaming online collaboration, so you could get performers in different parts of the world to be able to perform together at the same time. Yeah, I don't think any of them were ever amazing. Plus, also that's a very niche market, right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's very, very niche. All right, sick, man. Speak to you next week.
All right, sounds good. Have a good rest of your week and weekend. Appreciate it.